Mark.
Hi.
Hello. So you've recently started working with rfxcel, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on, what you see as the opportunities in Europe, how rfxcel fits in there, and get a feel for your background as well.
Well, as you know, there's a huge opportunity globally in serialization and associated services at the moment, but particularly in Europe. There's several thousand companies in Europe that need to get ready for a pretty tight deadline. February 2019 is just around the corner, and we'll need professional service providers to get that job done. And rfxcel, when I talk to people in the industry, is one of those names that pops up as people who can get the job done. And companies need that reliability, that dependability, that technical excellence to get them ready for their obligations under the law. As you know, the Falsified Medicines Directive is different to the Drug Supply Chain Security Act in the US. Mm-hmm. And it contains a number of wrinkles and a number of bits and pieces that companies need to know about, and data requirements that they need to get ready for. And they need to have a system that can cope with that. And from what I've seen, this is a great way of getting it done.
Yeah. So, if I'm a manufacturer and I have already built in serialization, for example, to comply with the USDS CSA law, am I set to go in Europe?
No. Europe, as you know, is different in the sense that the overlying data architecture is pretty similar. So it's a GS1 based data framework that is being used. So global trade item numbers, serial numbers, lot numbers, expiry, etc. The two big differences in the Falsified Medicines Directive are in the points at which data is captured. So in the US, it's transaction by transaction and it builds up over time. Right. In Europe, it's really, with some exceptions, it's the manufacturer's upload of data when they make the serial numbers and the pharmacist who verifies that number is true when they dispense the product. The in-between supply chain is not universally checked. There are reasons why it's checked at times, but not every transaction like in the US. The second big difference, of course, in Europe is that manufacturers have to make their products tamper evident. Right? The Drug Supply Chain Security Act is silent on the packaging, the physical packaging. In Europe, you have to close the box and make sure it stays closed.
So there are quite a few hurdles, though, that the EMVO have to get over, and of course the member states have to get over as well, to actually be able to roll this out. What's your thought on that? Do you think we'll get over those hurdles, or?
Yeah, and I think, these big systems are challenging. It's the first time it's been done. So it would be surprising if it all went smoothly, if it all went to plan first time. The EMVO is doing a great job of getting their side of the framework ready. And I think it's down to solution providers like rfxcel and others to help the manufacturers do their piece of the bargain. And is it going to be easy? No. But it needs to happen for patient safety. The underlying theme of all this is patient safety. And really what we're doing is helping drug companies to keep their products safe and traceable. That's worth the pain and the difficulty that we're going to have in the next couple of years getting it done. All of it's feasible. It's just a matter of will and people making sure they prioritize it.
Right. Okay. So the U.S. has delayed now enforcement for a year for DSCSA. How do you think that impacts the Falsified Medicines Directive? Do you foresee a delay there?
You can never rule that out, of course. It's possible. I'm not convinced that there would be a legislative move. I think, if anything, it would be like the US, where there's an enforcement holiday, if you want to call it that. Those tend to be less common in Europe. In Europe, a deadline is usually a deadline with these legislative-driven policies. I think the issue for drug companies is that they should not allow that delay to instill complacency in their management, thinking, let's leave it a while, let's leave it to the next fiscal year, let's delay some capex, etc. The reason there's been a delay is because people were having difficulty getting the job done in the time available. So that should tell people that this is a tricky project that they have to do. The reason why people have struggled with getting it done is that actually serialization isn't just a manufacturing challenge, as you well know. It's not printing numbers on bottles and that's the job done. It's really a business change program across the whole corporation. My background is in helping companies implement serialization, and the number of departments that get touched by a typical program is almost all of them. So they have to get their heads around how that works, and they have to do a lot of internal coordination to get it done, and that's going to take time, so people need to get going now.
So that actually brings up a good question, which is what should EU companies be thinking about to get compliant here?
I think the key thing clearly is that they have to get a system that enables them to pass data to the regulators. So even if you're a virtual drug company with no manufacturing of your own, if you're the license holder, then you have the obligation to report your data to the authorities. So that means you need a software system. You can't delegate that responsibility to anybody else. So you need the ability to receive and, if necessary, send data to and from and report out to the regulators. And you need to do that in a way that is consistent, high quality, validated in all of the usual manners. This is a fundamental change in the way the drug industry does its business. Before, we made things that were physical, you could hold them, and they were all the same within a batch. There was no differentiation. Tomorrow we make things that are physical but also virtual. The data has to match the box, and each pack along the production line is a different thing. So if an operator takes one out, when you've aggregated a box, it changes the universe for that data. So it's a training challenge. There's lots of other challenges apart from the technology challenge to get this done.
Right, which brings up another question. So many of the larger manufacturers have already kind of moved down the path and are certainly thinking about this, if not rolling out a plan for this. But how about the smaller companies and the virtual manufacturers? What should they be thinking about?
I think they should be thinking about what's their total burden to get this done. How much bandwidth do they have internally? Think about, when choosing a provider, what's my side of the deal? Am I going to have to employ a project manager? Is it going to take 9 months? Think it through and figure out what they can afford to do. The compliance obligation is non-negotiable. They have to get this done somehow. But, for example, at rfxcel, we can get this done within 60 business days.
Right.
So that's a big difference to many of the suppliers I've seen, where typically their Gantt charts stretch out for 5 or 6 months.
Right.
So I think we need to educate people that this doesn't need to be as painful as the common perception. It's a tricky, complicated challenge, but there are people who know how to do it.
Yeah. Well, that actually is an interesting point, because one of the things I think that we pride ourselves here at rfxcel in doing is that we like to take that burden away from the customer and actually help them with their data validation, managing their data, managing their trading partners in terms of what's necessary to gather information from them or pass information to them, and basically try to be that so-called white glove solution provider. So I certainly appreciate the fact that smaller and virtual entities are going to be very interested in that type of service. Because there are others out there that require them to really get their hands dirty and really get into this, which means having the staff to do that.
Well, that's great if you're a big drug company. You have a team of people with serialization in their job title. If you're a small company, you've probably got a head of manufacturing who wears 15 different hats.
Right.
And one of the hats they have this year is serialization. So they're not going to have the time to really get involved and roll their sleeves up in getting the job done. So we as solution providers need to make it as pain-free as possible for them to get ready.
Right.
Otherwise, they're just going to fail.
Yeah.
That's not in anyone's interest.
Yeah, no, I agree. So how can L4, L5 vendors help those customers get ready?
I think we have to be quick. We have to be efficient in what we do. We have to make our services easy to own. Too many times in this industry we've made things which are engineeringly fantastic, but actually they're a pain in the neck to put in. And we need to make sure that our stuff is almost consumer level of simplicity, if you like. The things that people are used to now in their private lives are starting to bleed through into industrial tools.
Yep.
And I think that's the way forward, is to make things intuitive, simple, quick to implement, easy to validate is another key one.
Yep.
Pharma is very validation heavy. So if you can't validate it, you're never going to sleep at night figuring out that you have the thing put to bed. So we need to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for people to get that compliance job done. Ideally, we need to give them added value. I think that's an area where there's just starting to be some interest in, if all of my boxes are unique and I can trace every box or bottle through the supply chain, what's new? What does that enable me to do in the next 2 years that I couldn't do 2 years ago?
Right.
And I know you guys have some great ideas.
Yes, yes. So in fact, if I'm a European manufacturer and I pick a solution for compliance in Europe, does that mean I need to pick other solutions for compliance in other worldwide places, whether the U.S., Brazil, other countries out there? Do I need a separate solution for every one of these?
And that depends on who you pick, of course. If you pick a mom and pop homemade solution that is only compliant for the problem you have in front of you on the table, that could well be the case. If you go with an experienced vendor like rfxcel, who knows what they're doing, who has a modular system, who's built things for different geographies before, then if something pops up, and it does happen, new countries start to come forward with a law that's a bit different from the existing ones, then they can adapt and give you a module, give you an upgrade that will help you to get ready for that.
Right.
It's really important to choose that initial provider as somebody who is experienced and is flexible.
Yes.
Otherwise you get boxed into a corner and then you do have to strip out and re-engineer.
Right. So you brought up the value add point about serialization. So quite often when we talk to a prospect who's looking for a compliance solution, quite often we hear, we need to solve this problem right now. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking to move forward on, etc. But then there's usually a voice in the back of the room, whether that's the business side of that company or whether that's a different group that's somewhat aligned with manufacturing, but not necessarily right in the heart of that compliance issue, who say, well, now that we're going to be serializing our products, there might be some other really interesting things that we can get out of that. And you just alluded to that. What do you see as potential in that area?
I think there's a whole bunch of stuff, and again, we can go from the low-hanging early stuff into the 5 or 10 years down the line. Ultimately, this is all part of digital health. It's about making the product and the person and the medical experience behind the product into a seamless experience that really starts to both prevent ill health and treat ill health. So in the longer term, having the ability to code a pack in a way that a patient can read with a mobile phone could start to generate all sorts of interesting ideas in that space. I think in the short term, from the supply chain perspective, having things individually traceable means that you can associate that data with that product and all of those different individual products with other parameters like temperature, like light, like humidity, like location. So you can start to get a whole compliance multi-dimensional picture of your product as it moves through the supply chain. Was there a time-related temperature excursion when it was in a certain place? And that's a kind of technology fusion that I think we'll see in the next couple of years, really starting to add value in the supply chain.
Yeah, so I guess what that really means is that as you look to solve your compliance challenge, if you're a manufacturer, you really need to be looking a little broader than that for a platform that can handle things that go beyond just compliance, and for that matter go beyond just EU compliance, right? To look at the worldwide picture. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those two things don't need to be mutually exclusive. I think there's a fallacy that you need to spend much more to get a future-ready system than you do to get a just good enough system. I think that's not the case. Clearly, if you buy a very simple, very basic system, it's going to do the job you want today, and that's it. And you need to buy something else and hope that it fits. The more intelligent customers that I've spoken to are saying, if we only think ahead a little bit, where's the extensibility of this product? Where's the long-term validation map going to be of this product?
Right.
How am I going to manage this through its life cycle?
Right.
And those are all issues that, if you think about them early, you can build into a well-specified product that you can't build into a really simple, just good enough product.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I think what you're really stating is that there is a return on investment that can be gotten from a platform for serialization over the long haul. And so this is not just a situation where we have to do it for a governmental compliance issue, but there's actually a way forward to get a significant return on that type of investment over time.
I agree, and I think the caveat I would put to that is that we all need to have the imagination to look for that ROI if we're going to find it. I think if you go with a mindset that says this is a compliance problem, the best I can ever get is compliant, and I'm going to spend the minimum possible to get there, then the prophecy will come true. I think if we start this with how can we build a system that starts to add value the more we use it and the more scenarios we put into it, then you can start to do very simple things early that enable you to get to that later on. And I think the more sophisticated systems that are out there enable customers to do that.
Yes, I agree. Well, thank you. It was great chatting with you, Mark, and hopefully we learned a few things today.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.